Okay, so let me see if I can get this right. Francesco, David or David?
Davide.
David. Okay. Massimiliano. And is it Paolo?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. Or gentlemen.
Perfect.
Fantastic. I'm so happy to be here.
We happy too.
Yeah, a lot.
It's an honor. It's amazing.
Okay. How can we start the conversation? Tell me what I can tell you.
And start me. So I would like to know how your passion for cinema was born.
It's interesting. I grew up on a very in a very small like a farm in the middle of America in the Midwest. And my father was a pilot for Pan Am, the airline, and my mother was a school teacher and a librarian. But the closest cinema was 50 miles, so maybe 80 kilometers from our house. So it's very rural, very remote. And I remember seeing, like, it was an event. If we went to the city or went to the town to go see a movie, and of course there were many movies as a child that I remember just like losing my mind. And the big one, of course, was Star Wars in 1977. That was the one that changed my life. And yeah, so but all of kind of those early Spielberg movies and just falling in love with. I remember seeing a movie when I was in London with my father, A Bridge Too Far, a World War II movie. And I was like maybe 9 or 10 years old, and I just was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I think it was my family loved films and art, and I just was drawn to the storytelling and the imagination of it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Paul. I really loved all your films involving Zack Snyder, but I'm also a lover of Actor Valor, one of your earliest films. Yeah, I really loved it. It's really great, and it really make a deep impression on me in my earliest day. And I want to ask you, from Actor Valor to 300 and also in Rebelmoon, you really dive into what it means to be a hero, and you examine the idea of brotherhood, which I think is some sort of archetype, from ancient Sparta to Belt to war, contemporary war. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. I'm a huge fan of Joseph Campbell, of the study of the hero archetype, the hero of 1,000 faces. So this is that kind of Campbellian idea of like the hero, and the hero archetype is very important to me. I think everybody has the capacity to be a hero in their own lives. You don't have to go save somebody from a burning building or fight in a war. You can just go to work and take care of your family and raise your children and things like that. Those are all heroic acts. So I think it's essential for humans to identify with just these ideas of like right and wrong and good and evil, and picking a side, and also the morality of what that is, and maybe sometimes the kind of the divine that plays a role in all of that. So I love heroic stories. I love heroes that are flawed and have faults that are maybe complex and more human. So it's not just the villain is kind of like twisting their mustache and saying, okay, like I'm the bad guy, but that you can see a little bit of yourself in both the villain and the hero, because I think that gives us a more human experience. Yeah.
Thank you. It was really inspiring.
Oh, cool.
Mr. Johnstad, we're waiting a lot of new works from you in the next in the foreseeable future. Let's hope sooner rather than later.
Sure.
We start from Rebelmoon. We're waiting for the continuation of the saga. such a huge fan. What you did with those two movies is absolute. Knock on wood, Zach said once.
Yes,
So we have that. We also have Brawler, the new movie that we're all very, very excited. Hopefully, we can ask you some bits from
of
that as
course.
well. We have LAPD,
Yeah.
and we also have 300 new bits, the
Okay.
prequel, the Blood and Ashes.
Yeah, sure.
Can I ask you generally if you want to expand on something? We're more than to know, but can you tell us how's the writing process going, and perhaps which one do you think we might see first?
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you, so kind of in order. So, as far as Rebelmoon, that's, as much as we outlined movies 3, 4, 5, and 6. I don't know, like those decisions are way above me, like how those things are made and where the money is going to come from. I hope that we get a chance to tell that story to its very end, because it's an amazing world, and I love writing those characters, Cora and Jimmy, and just is fantastic. So that, I mean, we know where we can go, and we have very detailed outlines, and Zack has literally plotted out the whole world. So with maybe some luck and some, an act of God, we'll get to go back to that world. The next one I think you mentioned is Brawler, which let's see. Oh, it's I have it right here. Zack made a cover for it. It's done.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that one's done. We're done writing. That was amazing. Same writing team as on Rebelmoon. So Zack, myself, and Shay Hatton. Fantastic. Great experience. I believe they're hoping to shoot maybe at the end of this year, or maybe the beginning, like in January. I think Zack is starting to talk to actors and really just finding the right people that can, pull off being kind of professional fighters and athletes. So if, he has to find somebody that either has that talent already, was a boxer or maybe a wrestler, or he's got to then train them to get them, kind of looking, kind of ready for the camera. And I think that would probably take 6 months maybe. So, but he's in the search, and he's deep in that. He and Debbie and Wes at Stone Quarry, so they're very excited about that. The LAPD, Zack and I are working on that right now. Just going through finishing our work. I think we're pretty close. We're in the third act of that film, so we probably have maybe another month of writing, and then that'll be done. I don't know which will go first, if Brawler will go first or the police movie will go first. But both of them are very different and super exciting. Obviously, the police one has more action and kind of car chases and that kind of action, and the fight movie is much more of a kind of a boxing and an MMA movie. But both have been fantastic to work on. As far as, Zack and I wrote Blood and Ashes, I think, which you mentioned. So he also has a 300 television show that he's working on. I'm not a part of that. I may be brought in later when that gets a little closer, because I don't do a lot of work in the television space. But when it's time, I might be brought into that. But I haven't had any kind of meetings or dealings with that. But Zack and I did write a beautiful movie, maybe 5 or 6. I guess it was right before COVID, or maybe the year 2000, 2001, called Blood and Ashes, which really was going to be almost a sequel. It started off thinking, oh, maybe we'll do a sequel, like a third 300 movie. And then it became, and it was the story of Alexander and Hephaestion. So it's really an Alexander movie. And and then it just became another kind of movie altogether. I think it's one of Zack and my best works that we've done together. And we've known each other, 30 plus years, but I'm very proud of that script. So hopefully it'll come, it'll find a home and he can go make that movie. But I think probably it'll either be Brawler or the cop movie. The LA cop movie will be, that'll be either one or two. I'm not sure which way it'll be. And then knowing Zack, as I do, I'm sure he will have some surprises, because he always likes to keep people guessing. So, yeah, so I'm excited. And there's another movie that he may announce that I think will surprise kind of everybody. And that may go first. So who knows? But that one I can't say anything about.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So it's a great pleasure to talk with you, and for me it's amazing to see the part, not the production of the movie, but the pre and the post. We interview a lot of editor, and you are the first screenwriter. So
Fantastic.
yeah, it's a big thing for us. So I want to ask you, how important is for you the world building of a movie, and how do you create it?
Yeah, I think, it's the wonderful thing is specifically with Zack, but with all directors, and I've been very fortunate to work with other directors, and but I can just speak to since we're talking about Zack, we can talk about that. He and I have had a friendship since I think 1992, so we're very close. I think we appreciate each other's aesthetics and kind of how we see the world. We're drawn to the same kind of maybe art or photography or literature. So I think the world building, I think the thing that is the essential thing about working with Zack or any director, and that I find for myself personally, is that I don't try to over intellectualize things. I try to really use and move from my heart or from my instinct or from my gut, my stomach, kind of what feels right. So that would be number one. Number two is not to kind of create any walls or barriers when it comes to curiosity, and really allowing my curiosity to be the compass for, so sometimes we won't sketch out something with a lot of detail. We'll just have kind of what they call a bullet point. And we'll just, okay, this scene is about this. So this scene takes place and, there's a robbery and, the police come. But we don't say exactly what happens. And then what that allows us to do is, it's kind of like if you're painting a room and you're painting the floor and you don't paint yourself in a corner and you're like, oh God, how am I going to get out of this situation? So if you just allow yourself a lot of latitude, then your creativity has room to kind of explore. So I think that's one certainly technique that I've used with many directors, certainly with Zack. Sometimes we'll whiteboard things out, so just on a big wall, and we'll just kind of write everything out, like, can we make this work? Another way, and Zack and I have used this a lot, and I find this very, I think because it goes to this childlike part of me, is that we'll draw like, just, it could be on the whiteboard or it could be just on a piece of paper. Like when you're a child, you would draw like a treasure map, like, oh, like X marks a spot and we're going to bury something in, my grandmother's backyard, whatever. And then we have to follow the map through the trees and over the hill and, through the market. And then we, find the treasure. And I think that in a 3-act structure, I've used that many times. There's a script that I wrote probably 20 years ago for Zack. It's called The Last Photograph, and now it's called The Horse Latitudes. But I used exactly that method. And Zack and I talked about like, okay, they start here and it starts in Paris, and then he gets on a plane, and literally kind of like in that Indiana Jones movie where you see the kind of, the airplane flying and, gas.
Yeah.
But we did that just visually for ourselves, so we could, kind of, if we ever got lost and thought, God, like, where are they right now? Oh, they're here. They're in Afghanistan, or they're in Pakistan, and oh, they're on horseback now and they're crossing the mountains. And it's a very easy way, just to kind of reorientate ourselves to kind of a map and a physical thing, and look at it and go, okay, I know where our actors are in the movie now. So the treasure map has always been one of my favorites, just because it's like something a kid would do, and anytime I can behave like a child is probably a good thing. Yeah.
Okay. Kurt, if I'm not mistaken, you started out as a first assistant director with Zack. What led you to write screenplay?
So yeah, so that's interesting. So even before I was a first AD, and this is kind of I want to say, it is a little bit of the divine. It is a little bit like, sometimes just God kind of pushes you and you have no idea. You have a plan, and then all of a sudden there's something else in front of you. So I really thought, so when I first met Zack, I was actually working behind the camera. So I was working as like a grip. So kind of like pushing a dolly, like just kind of behind the camera. I tried all sorts of jobs. I went to an art school called CalArts, or California Institute of the Arts, and basically I was like, then I came down to Los Angeles. I was like, okay, like I need to figure out how to get into this business. I didn't know anybody, so I was just like, I would take any job. When they had film, I was like, loading magazines for film, and then I kind of did some lighting and then grip work. And I was just really thinking, like, I don't know how I'm gonna get into this business. And I was maybe in my early 20s at this time, but I first met Zack. So and my backup plan was, which is crazy, but I thought, God, when I'm most at peace, I would be in the mountains, and like, so I thought, like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll be a mountain guide. Like maybe I'll move to Chamonix or the Dolomites, or I don't know. Like maybe I'll just like, I had this fantasy, like either go write a novel in Paris, or like be a mountain guide. And that was kind of my backup plan. And Zack kind of knew that. I was never really around, but I met him. So the short story is, I met him. I got a call. I was climbing mountains. I was climbing in Yosemite, which is a national park in America. I got a call saying, hey, do you want to come work on this music video? And I just showed up thinking, it's, I'm going to work on this thing. I'm going to make some money, and then I'm going to go back to the mountains and do my thing. Because I really wasn't really sure how I was going to work in Hollywood and what I was going to do. But then the short version of it is that on that music video, the director was Zack Snyder. And so we became friends. And then I didn't see him for about maybe a year or two after that. He called me saying that he was going to Chile to go film a car commercial. He had gone to his art school and was now working as a young director. I think I was 23 and he was like 25 at the time. And he asked me, can you help like rig the cameras on the side of the mountains? We're doing some snowboarding and like ice climbing and just different things. And can you help, you do that mountain climbing stuff? And I was like, sure, yeah, I can come down and do that. So we went down to Valle Navarro, to Chile, and did this commercial. And at the end of that commercial, he said, hey, let's get together, and afterwards when we're in LA, and I have to ask you something. So I did, and at that point he said my first AD, Zack's first AD at the time, was going to become a director, and he said, I want you to be my assistant director. And I was like, oh wow, like I don't know, like, because they're very different jobs, like from gripping behind the camera to like, leading a crew and being the first AD is a very different thing. And I was like, Zack, like, to be honest, like, I'm flattered, but like, I don't know how to do that job. Like, those guys are always yelling and they're always screaming and they're stressed out, and I don't know if I can do that. And he said, oh, well, I'm just figuring out how to be a director. So like, we'll figure it out together. Don't worry about it. So literally, like I'd been on a set for maybe a couple years and seen people do it and knew what I didn't like about that job. And so I just said, okay, Zack, like, here's the deal. If you'll let me kind of run your set based on mutual respect, but not fear and intimidation, because that was the bad version of what I saw, like people yelling. And I said, if you allow me to just, and I said, I'm going to make mistakes. He's like, we all make mistakes. It's fine. And he was so relaxed. But literally, to me, I look back at it and it's crazy because, like I was 23 or 24 years old. He was only a few years older. And then we had a run of these, like, his career, of course, just like rocketing. And for a decade, we just literally for 10 years, we worked nonstop. And he was, very in demand commercial director, some music videos, but mostly commercials. And we traveled all over the world, from North Africa to South America to Asia. I mean, Italy many times, shooting in Italy. And just shot for days and days on end. I mean, I think the 1 year we shot over 200 shoot days. Like it was crazy, like a crazy tempo. But on average we shot about 10 days a month. And so what that allowed me to do is, one, have a great life and travel with a dear friend and have good meals and nice bottles of wine. But it also allowed me to see the filmmaking process and be a very kind of important part of that, like orchestrating all the different departments and things. And then the other part of it is it allowed me just to have some time. I could work really hard for like 2 weeks, and then I could take a month off if I wanted, and I could write, and I could go to the mountains, so it was really, I was very fortunate. But I would tell you, I don't have any idea, like that was never my plan. I was never thinking I'm going to be an assistant director. I just, by Zack's generosity, but also by kind of some maybe divine luck or some kind of, I don't know. I got very lucky, and I just kept saying yes to, any experience. So I was that's kind of the first AD part of it. I'm going to close this window 1 second.
In the past, you worked on a lot of projects, and a project that it didn't go as it was expected, but we are really curious about is the Aquaman script. You worked on an Aquaman script in the earlier DCU years, and if you can talk about it, we are really curious to know what was it going to be like, and was it going to have some connection, some adherence point to the main saga that Zack was going to plan?
Sure.
And how was it different from what we saw?
Yeah, I think, I've never watched the movie that came out, so I can't speak to how it would be different. I just know what my version was. So how I can talk about this. So basically, of course, Zack was in the middle of like building all of the DCU out, and really was in charge of every little kind of piece. And so I remember kind of one of those whiteboards he had in his office, and it was in an old warehouse or an old sound stage where they used to paint before there was digital backdrops. They would paint like the backdrops of like, oh, there's the Wizard of Oz, or these massive paintings that were in these warehouses, and they would be on these kind of frames that were on a motor, and they would just like raise them up and then down below. It's fantastic, like old Hollywood. And so, of course, Zack then found this space, and it was this beautiful. There's, every once in a while he'll put up an image of this amazing kind of industrial loft, and he then created, that was his office. He turned that into his office, and then on that wall he put a whiteboard that was probably, I would say it was maybe 60 feet, like 30 meters long, like maybe probably 25 meters long by, 3 meters high. It was crazy. It was like a giant wall that he could, of course, which was hilarious. He would have a button, and it was on a motor, and so he could like draw on it and like he could draw frames of the movie, but he could also draw. He basically wrote down every movie and the timeline of every movie, from Man of Steel, Beavis' Ass, Justice League 1, Justice League 2, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Flash. Like, he had every movie and all of where they intersected and where all the kind of Easter eggs were for each movie, putting them in the next movie and so forth. So it was like, I kind of joked with him. I was like, it's like that back house in the movie Beautiful Mind, when they go and they're like, oh my God, like this is like, there's a madman in this place. But it was like that. And he was able to, of course, with like a button, like a remote control, he could like then hide it. Like he could just like, it would disappear. Like it was like like in the Batcave, it was nuts. But he could make the whole thing disappear from anybody in the public. If somebody was coming in, he would just like hit the button and it would go down into the basement and nobody could see it, which I thought was hilarious. But so my involvement in that was really, I think I just finished working on the 300 sequel with him, and he was like, hey, and the studio had asked, like, would I be interested in one of the superhero movies? And I said, sure. Zack was already doing Man of Steel. And I said, I think, Aquaman would be cool. And so I started thinking about that. And really, I think from what I understand, the tone that I pitched, and I pitched the studio and they said, great, you're on. The tone I pitched was a little bit more like kind of a man with no name, like a little bit more of like a Clint Eastwood, kind of like Aquaman is a drifter. We don't really know a lot about him. He's an anti-hero. He's not very social. Kind of, but it was very much an origin story where, as a boy, his mother had come and they were living in a lighthouse, and then he fell into the ocean, but then, they thought he was going to drown. And all of a sudden he just, took his breath. And there's a whole thing that was a reveal of like, oh, he has these, he's really not of this world. And, I got, so I started the draft, and I was maybe 40 or 50 pages in, and then James Wan came on the project. So they hired a director, and they didn't want to wait for me to deliver the script, but they wanted James to come in and, start kind of course correcting the script, as it were, like, hey, putting his, influence on it, which is fine. But the tone was very different. James wanted to do, I remember him saying like he wanted to do like more of a romantic comedy, like a kind of Romancing the Stone kind of movie. And I was like, okay, I'm writing like a Clint Eastwood movie. Like, I don't know how that's going to like match up. But so ultimately then what they did is they hired another writer to write James's draft. And then, there became this little bit of this competition where they said, well, the best script's going to win. And I was like, okay, great. Like I'll always bet on myself. I'm going to write a great script. Even if it doesn't get made, I'll know it's what I want to do. And then maybe a month more into that, the studio just said, hey, put your pencil down, or they just told me to stop writing. And basically they said, we're going to go with James's guy. So I never ended up completing the script. It was a little bit, they just were aligning. Ultimately in Hollywood, it's a director's medium. It's not a writer's medium. In television, it's a writer's medium. But So I think I got to page maybe 60, something like that. It was about halfway through, going into the end of the second act and into the third act, and they just said, we're going to go with James's guy because they have a relationship, much like you have relationships with Zack. He has a relationship with this writer, and we think we're going to get to the draft faster. Which that's just business. Sometimes that happens, and yeah, but I never saw the film. But I love Jason Momoa. He's great, and he's a lovely guy, and yeah. But I wish I mean, it would have been fun to see that version of it. But I think it might have been too. I don't know if it's too dark, but it was just a little bit more grounded and not as. I think probably tonally it was closer to what Zack was doing in his films than the direction they started going. Just because I had a loyalty to serve Zack's vision and make it consistent from all the way across the film. So I didn't want to try to write something that I didn't feel was truthful to that.
It's really interesting to see how Hollywood works even behind the scenes. It's stuff like this is you see in the trades an article that two scripts are being written, and to know a little bit more about behind the scenes is so incredible. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would say to that, like, I mean, I don't know if the best film did win. But the reality is, like, sometimes that happens in business, and it is so hard to get a movie made, regardless of who's telling the story. If it's me or Will Beal or whoever the other writers are, it's like I'm just happy for any writer. I'm just happy that when a movie gets made and it's good, it's like, okay, great. Like, people go out to the movies and enjoy it, and and just disappear in their imagination for two hours. Like, that's fantastic. So. Any good movie is a win for the audience and for the business, for sure.
Absolutely. About movies that we desperately want to see, you named Horse Latitudes before, and it's one of these movies that has been following Zack for a lot of years, and also you as well. And it's one of those projects that perhaps are the most interesting because it's one of the most obscure in a way. We don't know too much about it, and it's really every tiny bit that we've been knowing about it, it's so interesting. Can you tell us something more about it, perhaps?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you a little bit without going into detail. So the film, it hasn't, and this is kind of the this is why you just have to be open sometimes to kind of the mystery of life. It's a little bit like when you're walking down the street and you make a left-hand turn, and then if you would have made the right, you hear a car crash and you're like, oh my God, like, I made the left and I didn't go right. Like, thank God. Like, why did I decide to go left? And I think that so the interesting thing about this is that the project really came from Zack and I, when we were about to do 300. We had written 300 and we were waiting to see if it was going to get greenlit. We were brought on to adapt a Tom Clancy, like a military spy project for Paramount. And it was called Rainbow Six, a novel. And so we had modernized it, and it was going to be super cool. And Zack was really excited. And this was maybe 2004. So again, a lot was going on in the world. America, 9/11 had just happened, and America is now, I think it was in Afghanistan, maybe going to Iraq. So we kind of looked at this geopolitical, like, what's happening in the world, and we had created this. It's basically the building of a team. It's like the Dirty Dozen, or like it's a mission movie. And we had created the Rainbow Six team, and then we had dropped them into Afghanistan, and we had this kind of whole thing happen. The movie ended up never happening. The great thing was it was another time to write and just be creative with Zack, so that's always a win for me. you know, and we were paid some money, and that's fine. But you know, it's one of the long list of like being a working writer. You know, I've been very fortunate to have films made, but probably for every one that gets made, 5 are just jobs that never get made, just because, you know, it might be the actors don't line up, or the studio decides to go in a different direction, or, you know, who knows. So there are lots of films that I've written that never see the light of day. But the good thing about Rainbow Six was Zack, in kind of his wisdom, was just like, you know, the funnest part of the movie was this section, like these like 30 pages. Like, this doesn't seem like a movie. This seems more like Apocalypse Now. And I was like, oh, okay. And so he's like, maybe we just do our own thing. And so out of this very kind of commercial job where he and I were working and writing, you know, for Tom Clancy and Paramount Studios, that doesn't happen. But then kind of as he goes and does 300, and then of course the success of 300, he had a little ability to say, well, maybe we just tell our own story. And so what was The Last Photograph and is now Horse Latitudes was really just us finding, again, that treasure map. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if a guy started here? And we were looking, one, for a couple things. I was interested about exploring a war photographer, and kind of the idea of like somebody being a voyeur, kind of like always framing violence and framing, kind of being separated from actual engaging in this world, but just documenting the world. So there was that component. And then making it a two-hander, that the other character is of that world, is of a world of violence, is a man of action, so you have a very kind of passive person, and, you know, they're opposites. So then when you put them together on screen, there's conflict and just tension, and they're always at each other's throats. And it's a lot like, sometimes any of those great two-hand movies, it could be, you know, like Midnight Express, you know, the De Niro movie, like, or not Midnight Express, Midnight Run. So, you know, those kinds of movies where you have two opposites and they're just having to hold the screen together, I think are always interesting. So what I can tell you about this script is basically it's a war photographer, or a photographer, and he takes a picture that draws this other man out of his world, because that last photograph, is of significance to the other character, and it sets them both into motion on this like grand, crazy adventure. And so for Zack, it was his goal. He said, okay, this is what I want you to write me. I was like, okay. And he's like, I want you to write me Apocalypse Now meets Antonioni's The Passenger, meets like kind of like a weird, like Cormac McCarthy, like Blood Meridian, like I don't know, that's the world. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, great. I'll go. You go do Sucker Punch, and I'll go like just, you know, freaking, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what I guess I'm just gonna sit here and bleed on the typewriter. I have no idea what I'm gonna do. But so it's a very it's really a character driven, beautiful story about loss and forgiveness, but also there's, you know, it's in this world of violence, and it's I would say it's closer to kind of a South American kind of like magical realism, like it could be like a Gabriel Garcia Marquez, like things, you see things, and are they real or aren't they real? Is it mystical? So I'm very excited for Zack to, you know, make it, because there were a couple other directors that were, you know, Zack was going to do it, and then he got very busy with the DC world, and then other directors chased it, and then that didn't happen, and and then we got very close. We had Sean Penn was attached to play one of the characters, and Christian Bale. So I did lots of drafts for both of those guys, which was fantastic. And then that all fell apart. And so, you know, when it happens, it'll be an amazing announcement. I think that of all the scripts, I think that one is closest to Zack and my heart, just because we've had it for so long, and We've been sitting on it. So if he gets an opportunity to make it, I'd be very happy for him. Yeah, he's been thinking about it a long time.
Let's hope, as Snyder fans, we have a passion for hashtags. So perhaps, maybe. I think this video might start some notifications might pop up. Let's say that.
Hopefully, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and this for me is super special because I am an editor, so for me, editing and script writing are in some kind related. I wanted to ask you, during the production of a movie, maybe the movie take a change and turns. How do you react to that? That maybe you are not on the set and you can say something, but how how for you is the movie changing?
Yeah, I mean, I have so look, I mean, I love my part of the process, but I also am very aware, and maybe this is because, I was an AD and because I saw all the people that, would show up and work, and, everybody's leaving their families and missing their kids, dance recital, or they aren't going home for dinner, or they're working long hours. Like, everybody is participating. So for me, it's like, I don't have a problem getting a note from an actor or a studio or a director if it makes it better. And more often than not, everybody's contribution is making it better. Sometimes I would say more often than not, if cuts are being made to my work, it's making it better, than not making it better. I'm pretty much an optimist when it comes to that. If I really wanted to if I wanted to control the story so much, and didn't want it, I could write a play or I could write a novel and just say, you know what, this is the word, this is how it's said, and it can't be cut, it can't be edited, it can't be formatted for the airplane versus the theater. Like, I think that I have enough grace with my own work to allow, because the thing is that even the actor will maybe say a line with a different inflection or emotion, where the movie that I'm writing, or the story that's in my head, has never been the story that I've ever seen. It doesn't matter if it's 300 or Atomic Blonde, or like the movie in my head for example, when I was writing 300, because nothing ever looked like that before. Like, in my mind, I'm writing a story and I'm thinking, oh, it's going to look like Braveheart, or it's going to look like Gladiator. Like, it's going to look like a movie that, like, or it's going to look like The World that I can see. And Zack kept saying, like, he'd hold up the, graphic novel. No, it's going to look exactly like this. I was like, okay, well, I don't know how you're going to do that. And it did look exactly like that. So, for me, I look at, there's so many people that are contributing and lending their skill and their craft after I write something down. What I've learned to do is to write, in a lot of ways, in kind of the last 20 years, to be very lean or very sparse in my kind of like, not over direct the actors, not give them too many emotions, not give them, just really allow the story or the scene to play and let them decide what choices they're going to make. And that could be the director or the actor, and that actually has come from working a lot with great directors, but also really great actors. I remember Christian Bale, coming to me and saying, why are you saying, the line was, he narrows his eyes at the horizon. And so to me, it was kind of like he's like doing this, like he's looking out, and he's like, but maybe I don't want to narrow my eyes. Maybe I'm going to be surprised, or maybe I'm going to, like, not even look. I'm going to look at my feet. He's like, don't try to direct me don't give that to me. Like, let me make that choice. And so I think for me, I'm very open to, like, anybody who's like coming in and cutting something or shaping something, as long as it serves the story and makes the story better, then it actually makes me look like a better writer. So it's like, okay, well, great. Like I'm glad everybody, loved the movie. So yeah, I'm very open. I'm not precious with that stuff. Yeah, I think, and it makes me sleep better at night.
Yeah, because it's important to see figures that love, that have passion, because the article don't say about this. So thank you again, because it's really important to recognize person that work in the industry, especially in the sector, not the director, not the actor that we know. We have this, but the screenwriter, the editor, the makeup effect, everything. So
Yeah, and I think to that point also, they say that a movie is made 3 times, and it's made once, when it's written, the second time, when you actually film the movie, and then the third time when you're doing your job as an editor, when you really piece it together. And maybe it's made the fourth time is like when the audience experiences it. That's probably the fourth time that it's kind of made like, oh my God, like I love that sequence or I love that scene. The experience of going to the movie. But I think everybody has a role to play, and I just know that I'm kind of one small part of that for sure.
is important. Each is important.
But yes,
Very
exactly.
important.
Each is important. And is not always advertising this way. So thank you. Thank you for it.
Kurt, you wrote True Vengeance, Act of Valor, The Atomic Blonde.
Yeah.
Then you co-write 3000, Rise of an Empire, and Rebelmoon. Is
Yeah.
it easier to write a story alone or to write it together with the others?
I like both. I mean, yeah. So like the Horse Latitudes, I wrote. I think Zack came in and I wrote a few scenes. Atomic Blonde, I wrote all by myself. Which it was called The Coldest City, and that was. I mean, there was a graphic novel, so I was adapting that, but there was a lot of world building there as well. I like both. I think I like. It's wonderful, like specifically Zack and Shay. Shay has kind of been a new in the last like 2 or 3 years. Working. The first time I'd worked with him was on Rebelmoon. He's been great. I think there is something about when you trust people, when they have the same kind of belief system and kind of look at creativity the same way and can solve problems. There is this kind of what I've noticed with Zack. So for Zack and I, we've been maybe writing together 25 years. Is that he'll write a scene and he won't like. We kind of go, okay, this is the first act. I'll take this scene, you take that scene, and it's literally we're leapfrogging each other. So he does like scenes 1, 3, 5, and 7, and I do 2, 4, 6. So every other scene is his, and every other scene is mine. And what that does is he'll call me, or he'll just send me the scene, and sometimes he'll just read me like, okay, this is how I'm going to end the scene, and I'll be like, okay, that's cool. Or, oh, I see what he's doing there. So then I can then kind of like in making furniture, like you dovetail, like you join the furniture together, and there's a way to or make these kind of like little bridges from scene to scene. And I think that what's fun about writing with a partner, and if it was 2 partners like Shay and Zack or just Zack, is that there's a little bit of this creative competition that happens in a very positive way, where he'll call me and Zack would call me and he'll read me a scene and I'll be like, oh my God, oh you bastard, like you have done it, like that scene is awesome. Okay, now I have to really like I have to try to outdo him or out kind of perform him. And so there is this kind of like you're almost like running next to each other, and of course you both want to win the race, but you want to cross the finish line at the same time. Nobody wants to get the gold medal, So I think that there is a fun part of that, kind of you push each other creatively, and you're also responsible to somebody else. Writing alone is it's a different kind of pressure because all of the pressure is on you. You know, you don't have somebody to go to like deflect or to go, God, okay, you know, the reality is like, also the fun part of writing with another writer is that, you know, you get done twice as fast, because if everybody's writing 3 to 5 pages a day, you know, then, or one scene a day, well, and if Zack writes one scene a day, then at the end of the week you have 10 scenes instead of 5 scenes. So there is a kind of the energy of writing with a partner. You get a script a lot faster. And the thing is that, you know, but there are no excuses when it's just you and you just have to sit down and be disciplined and write and just look at the work that needs to be done. There is something fun about that too, because all the pressure that, and I work well under pressure, that kind of becomes like, you know, turns the coal into a diamond, you know, like you really just, you know, it gets kind of pushed down on you. And you're like, okay, I have to get this scene, or I have to do this action sequence, or I have to make this really cool, and you just have to be open in a different way creatively, kind of maybe to, you know, I talked a lot about this kind of like the divine or this kind of mysterious thing. I don't know where the creativity comes from, but I just try to not get in its way. Like I just try to be open to it. Does that make sense? But I love both. Yeah. And strangely enough, I think after these couple movies, maybe towards the end of the year, I want to go back and write something just for myself, you know, without a partner, and just to have ownership of it, just like, so it's just my voice. And I think that's important. Yeah.
Thank you. This is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, in 300, a thing that you really changed, I think for the better, was the role of Queen Gorgo. And because, you know, in Frank Miller's comics, she was just a character. Here, she is the second protagonist, actually. And, that made me think of also of Rebelmoon, of Atomic Blonde. So it's clear that female leads are very important to you. And, you know, you quoted Campbell, the goddesses in some way.
Sure.
And I wanted to ask you to talk a lot about this, and also if we can expect some female lead also in Brawler. That is something, I know it's a very male film, but coming from you,
Yeah.
I think it could be.
Yeah. So there are a couple of females. There's one amazing female or a woman character in Brawler, which I mean, I think is going to be, this film is, you know, and Zack, you know, kind of early, and I'll speak to Brawler, and then I'll speak to kind of the archetype of the female or the goddess, or the warrior. So with Brawler, like the tone of Brawler, and he was approached to kind of make this film and said, hey, would you be interested in something like this? And I said, yeah, sure. I said, what are you thinking? And he's like, and I said, because I've never written a sports movie, and I love sports movies. Like one of those movies, just like, you know, like I'm old enough to remember it. Like, you know, I remember when Rocky came out, like the first Rocky came out, just like Star Wars. Like that was a movie when I was a kid. I was like, man, this, like, I'm losing my mind. This is awesome. I want to be a boxer. That didn't happen, but saying that, I realized, I said, you know, if we can write a really cool sports movie that is kind of like Rocky, an underdog movie, but also has kind of the grit and kind of the street kind of 8 Mile. I don't know, the Eminem, I don't know if you know that film, but like if we can kind of make that a sports movie, like that would be cool. And Zack's like, great, that's what we're gonna do. And so that's really like the tone of Brawler, again, is I think it's it's very different, you know, and it's a lot like kind of Horse Latitudes. I think what I'm excited for Zack in this next season of his directing is that he's going to make these films that are very deeply character driven, but aren't in these massive budgets and are just more intimate and really actor focused. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he does with that. So that's the one piece about Brawler. There is a woman character who's fantastic. And then I would say the movies that really I loved. I mean, there are lots of movies, and I'm a huge fan of movies. But one of the directors that I've always admired from his first films is James Cameron. And James Cameron, almost every one of his movies, it's a female hero. It doesn't matter if it's Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, you know, or Linda Hamilton in Terminator. I mean, yes, you have Schwarzenegger, but Linda Hamilton is the heart of that movie. You know, so all of his movies have these incredibly strong women. And really, he was the guy who showed everybody, you know, a huge action franchise can be driven by a woman lead and can be held by it. So I kind of grew up in those movies. His movie Aliens like blew my mind. Like when that movie came out, it was still one of my top favorite action movies. So I always looked at it as like specific to 300. You're right. I mean, in the graphic novel, you know, Gorgo says goodbye to Leonidas in the wheat field, like come back with your shield or on it, and then she's not in the graphic novel ever again. Like, yeah, and part of it was when Zack and I were adapting that, we literally adapted the graphic novel. And once they left, it was just like, I was just like, Zack, there's a problem. We need to create a B story because they just go off to like the 3 days and then they're just fighting for 3 days and it's awesome, you know, and I know you're going to make it cool, but there's like, we need to know why they're fighting, the why of it. And that's, you know, we need to make this a love story. And I think the way to do that is, well, that's his queen, that's Gorgo, and she needs to be back fighting and like all the kind of palace intrigue and kind of the twists and betrayals and like that, the audience is going to buy into that. And of course, you know, Zack was very funny. He just said, okay, yeah, well, that's awesome. You go figure that out. I'm like, what? And you know, just like, what are you telling me? He's like, well, you can just write it, you know, be a Spartan queen. And I was just like, I don't know anything about Sparta or being a queen. Like, he's like, you'll figure it out. It's gonna be awesome, you know. And that's kind of how like he solved that problem. So the balance, I think, of making that a love story made the movie better. And you know, we would just kind of workshop that idea of like, how about this, or how about she's betrayed, or how about, you know, she has to like do this. And I think all those scenes, you know, so I ended up writing all those scenes, and yeah, I think they made the movie better than the graphic novel in a lot of ways. And I love the graphic novel. And I think, you know, as far as other action, the heroes or heroines, yeah, I mean, I remember early on talking to Charlize about, it was a graphic novel called Coldest City, which became Atomic Blonde. And I said, Charlize, like, I'm going to write you a movie like every guy is going to play your part. Like that's like, but you're going to play it. Like the whole fun of this movie is that you're as much of a badass. Like Tom Hardy would have wanted to play your role because it's going to be so cool, or whoever, you know, and I think that, you know, and certainly who directed that film, Dave Leitch, is a dear old friend. He actually, I don't know if you guys know this, but he is one of the Spartans in 300. He's, you know, so Dave, you know, I've known him for, you know, 30 some years, and he, you know, just has an amazing career as a director. But it was one of those things where I was like, looking at that thinking, Dave had the ability with his stunt performing with his team to design a movie around Charlize to make her, you know, the next superhero or the next John Wick or the next whatever. And I think that movie is one of my favorite movies, that he was able to pull that off. Yeah, it was really fun. So yeah, I love strong female characters. I have 3 daughters, so like that, I've raised 3 girls, and I, I don't know if they all appreciate my movies, but hopefully they can look at it as like, okay, there's some badass women out there taking care of business. So yeah.
Thank you.
Speaking about female characters, strong female characters, I think that I'm coming back to these movies because I love them so very much. Rebelmoon is something of a gem. It's something that perhaps wasn't understood the way it should have been, because it was compared to other sagas, while it was clearly trying from the start on a visual level, on a narrative level, to be its own thing and to tell a story that's bigger, that's deeper also than others, especially considering that this is a new universe, and a new universe that wasn't tied to the preconceptions or 40-year-olds shackles in a way. What do you think that we can hopefully in a world where we get to see the sequels, what would you be excited for fans to see in the continuation of the story from the end of part 2, when we discover that, spoiler alert, is alive, and this team is going to find her and fight for her?
Yeah.
What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that we wanted to take a very much like the Seven Samurai, very simple narrative, like grounded kind of in the earth or on veldt, with these farmers, hide our hero within these people, and then have everything exposed, that she actually isn't of this world, but is their bigger kind of the bigger machinery of the movie and the storytelling is at play. The thing that you would definitely see in those next kind of I'll just call it, if we call it the trilogy, but Zack, of course, was always looking at it as 3 movies, but each movie is 2 parts. That's kind of what we saw. These first 2 movies was really 1 movie, but he just broke it into 2 pieces. So in his mind, it's always a trilogy, but it's a trilogy. Each one, it's 1 A and B, 2 A and B, 3 A and B. So it would have been 6 movies. The middle of the movie is definitely, we know that Issa, the princess, is alive, and then it's the quest to find the princess. And I mean, I won't go into detail of the scale and the scope, but I would say if we imagine, I would trust Zack to do this, and I would say if we know what the beginning of the movie was and the scope and scale was, and it was fairly intimate, and there were sequences in it, but it started to get bigger and bigger. The scope and scale of the middle of the movie, and certainly the final or the last movie, when we were kind of designing it, I was just like, I have no idea how he can actually film this, because it was the scale was so massive. Just the sequences, and where there would be the collies, and and just the fleets of dreadnoughts, and I'm just thinking it's so huge. And of course, that idea of really, in the kind of a generality, it was the second movie was to find the princess, and then the third movie is to make sure that the princess is where she should be, and where she should be is sitting on the throne and putting her back on the throne and properly ruling her over her over the mother world. So I think that's, I can't give you all the details, but that kind of the general idea is like, make sure that the true monarch is, the true ruler is in power, and how she gets there and what happens, who knows. And even if that, it's because it's crazy, and maybe you have to get Zack on here and he'll tell you more, but I'm sworn to secrecy.
Thank you so much. It's again, I have the art book here with the
I see
storyboards,
it.
the photo. Can I? It's huge and
Oh yes,
it's
oh my God,
shiny.
I
It's
love it.
gorgeous, and so it's really incredible to open it and to see all the interesting details from the storyboarding aspect to the to the storytelling, the depth that you get. Oh, Zack's signature. the the depth of the storytelling, the accuracy. It's very also you were speaking about your start as a visual storyteller as well, like with literally holding the camera, and it's interesting to see how you collaborate as well with with Zack. Also, since also he's someone that kept the camera, held the camera, now holds the camera in his movies. It's this parallels between the. It's really interesting to see how the visual styles links you and makes you work so well together. It's
and the fascinating thing, and probably the books have that. I mean, some people know this, but once we write the story, and I think at the most that script was like it was crazy. It was like 212 pages. It was a massive. It was, when we finished it, I was just like, Zack, this is like a. And of course, I was like, this is going to be it's 5 hours a movie. This is a 6-hour movie. Like, how are we going to do this? He's like, oh, we'll cut it in half and we'll make 2 movies. And I'm like, okay. But he then, once he's written it, then he literally will draw every shot, like every frame of that movie is already in his head. Like, so he will literally just board out every, like, it's on a 32 mil. It's on this is, so like for me, I'm still like, I would get on a set and I'd be thinking like, where am I in this world? And he's like, oh no, we're right down here. We're down here low, and it's because he's already shot the movie in his head, and it's unbelievable. Like to see, when we would go into a room, and sometimes we'd be like literally on a soundstage, and there would just be walls and walls of just every shot that he hand draws. It was unbelievable. Yeah, really. Thousands of images that. It's really neat to be inside of his head like that.
yeah.
Talking about infilmable stuff, how do you write an action sequence? So this is for me is incredible. How a screenwriter writing an action sequence that is like pure visually. So there is not a dialogue between maybe there is, but it's
Sure.
physical. So how do you write?
Yeah, I would say. So I'll give an example that isn't. I'll give 2 examples. So I remember so there's an example in 300 where I wrote, I think it was the Leonidas, where he kind of breaks away, and it's called the Leonidas freelance, where he does kind of goes out alone, kind of out of his feelings. And I think it was how that was written was like, Leonidas breaks away, and it's a ballet of blood and violence. That's it. So of course, then that becomes interpreted. And this is why I would say, like, you have to trust the people that you're collaborating with. So then people like Zack, and then people like Damon Caro, who was doing his stunt coordinating and his fight choreography. And then like Chad Stahelski, who ended up doing John Wick with Dave Leitch. and has done all the Wick films. Like Chad also, Damon Carr was the stunt coordinator, and Chad Stahelski was the fight coordinator on 300. So you have these, the fact that like both Dave and Chad went off to be directors, like you can tell that these guys have an unbelievable physical kind of awareness and manifestation of how they see things practically and visually, but that they're able to then choreograph those things to the screen. So it's not a surprise that they're like, okay, I want to be a director. I want to tell my story, and I'm so happy for both Chad and Dave for the careers that they've created for themselves. So I think for me, again, it's like it's not saying, okay, it's a jab, cross, punch, elbow, like that's not my business. Like I can understand it, but it's a lot, just creating enough of an opening for somebody who that's their skill set to come in and then do all the previs and talk to Zack or talk to the director and then create those sequences. The other scene I would say that became very, well known is in Atomic Blonde, the stairwell sequence. Like that sequence, I knew that there was going to be a sequence, and I knew that I had to get her from out of an apartment building down to a car. And I knew that, okay, it's going to be fun. It's in an elevator and down a sequence. But I literally just wrote it as like, Lorraine was the character's name. Lorraine fights like a man. She's throwing elbows, knees, and punches like a prize fighter. It's 3 against 1. It's not a fair fight. And that's basically, kind of like sets the tone or the attitude of the scene. Like, just like, okay, it's brutal. It's not pretty. And it's going to get more brutal as they're kind of leaving the building. And then then maybe it would be like, once the fight starts, I just might say they tumble down the stairs. They fight through the second floor. They fall out the window. And it just, I don't design it so much, but I just allow, because of course then Dave and his team, at that time it was 8711 and all of Chad's guys and all the stunt guys were, and not strangely enough, but then on Atomic Blonde, the coordinator that Dave Leitch brought in was Sam Hargrave, and Sam Hargrave was the director of the Extraction movies with Hemsworth. So Sam had a very good sense of like, okay, this is how I want like to, shoot this and previs this. So I think that it's really just about giving kind of the attitude of the scene and kind of the tone, and you can set that. Sometimes I can set that with like a needle drop or a soundtrack of like this music is playing. And it's just kind of the energy of the scene, but you want the scene to move as quickly as you can, and you want people to be turning the page, and you don't want them to get caught up in like, oh, he's, like using some technical term, like it's a spinning hook kick to an arm bar to like, no, like just let the professionals do that. And they'll make it look awesome, and that's part of me understanding, like, it also slows the read down where you're telling people things like, whatever. It's just like, you want the emotion of the scene to work before like the technical, like what they're doing in the scene to work. Cause that's really any scene you want it to work on an emotional level first. So,
And
yeah.
how do you feel to watch the result?
Oh, that's
Maybe you are surprised too.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. And I remember, well, with Atomic Blonde specifically, Dave called me and he said, hey, the guys, meaning his stunt team, he was like, the guys are working. I told him like, this scene needs to be really spectacular. And I was like, okay. He's like, so the guys are coming out. He goes, it might be a little longer than you wrote it. And I was like, all right, well, it's like, look, you can always make it shorter. You could always, if it has to be cut, you can always edit it, right? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I think we're just gonna like go for it. We're just gonna totally go for it, and it could be just one crazy long take, and we'll see if it works in the movie or not. And if not, we can just kind of make it tighter. And of course, then it's, I don't know, it's like 10 or 12 minutes long. It's like the huge long sequence. And everybody talked about it. And he's like, I think we're just going to keep it. And I was like, that sequence is ridiculous. Like, of course, like, why not? Like, and I set the tone of that scene, and it has, it has everything. It has, they jump in the car and then the car chase. Actually, the one thing that I had actually written a longer car chase before they ended up in the water, and they just didn't have the time or money to film it. So he was like, if anything, we're going to shorten that piece. And I was like, that's fine. Like, the most important thing is they get hit and they end up in the water, and then her package, dies, and she has to like abandon it. So I think for me, that film kind of blew me away, because Dave just went to Berlin. I wasn't on the set. I had no idea. I was working on another movie at the time, writing, and he came back and he showed it to me. I was like, oh my God, Dave, this is great. Like, you did it. Like, and I knew he was going to, make a cool movie. So that of course, that's one of those times where, it just surprises you. Yeah.
Yeah. Atomic Blonde is amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this is, I know, a real question, is a special request. I would like to ask you a favor, because I am a screenwriter.
Yes.
And I would like that a professional screenwriter read my script.
Yeah, sure.
Only for an opinion on advice. I wrote a script and that was read by John Borman,
Yeah, I know who Borman is. Favorites.
Who appreciated it a lot. He liked the story, the action. He advised me to find an agent. I tried, but no one asked for me. So it's possible to send it to you for an opinion. Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if it's in English, because I don't speak Italian, so I apologize.
It's in English. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah. I'll read it. Yeah. Wow. Just I'll make sure I'll send you my email, and then you can just send it to me directly.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is my great
much.
4 years ago was my birthday, so this is my gift.
Oh, thank you. Well, happy.
Wow, thank you. Kurt, thank you so much, because you are a very, very, truly amazing person. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this opportunity, because it's amazing to talk with you.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Well,
from me.
Yeah, hopefully I was able to give you some insight of this crazy life that I have out here. And I think that you'll be, if you like the Zack Snyder movies, I think you're going to be very surprised. He's going to have some announcements coming up, and certainly the next couple films I've been lucky enough, he's going to be making. I've written with him. One of them was Jay and he, and then the other one just he and I. But I'm very blessed to have that relationship. It's always been fun, and it's always fun to see how it changes from the movie in my head to the movie that goes from my head to his head, and then out into the world. It's always much better than I could ever imagine. So yeah, it's fun.
It's incredible. It's amazing. Thank you so much. Me and Paolo, we are writing a book about Zack Snyder and the Joseph Campbell and the Campbellian journey. Yeah. So hearing you talk about it as well, it's really, really amazing. I'm speechless.
Yeah.
Well, if there's anything I can do to help you, or if you want me to talk further, or just you let me know. Reach out on Vero or whatever, and David has a way to get a hold of me. But I'm happy to help you guys with your book or any of your kind of creative things. I'm glad we got to spend this time together today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hopefully when some of these movies come out, we can have a chance to speak with you again if you
Of course.
if you have the time, because it's really we've done some interviews, but I think this one has been one of the most fun, and you're really an incredible person to talk about. So thank you very much.
And
You're
one-
very welcome.
One last thing. You say that you love mountain and climb. You ever been to Italy to climb?
Yeah, I have.
On the Dolomites. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they're gorgeous. They're gorgeous. Yeah. So
When you come,
Yeah.
call us.
Okay. Yeah. No. Exactly. If we get I'm usually in Europe maybe once a year. My sister lives in Berlin, so I try to get to Europe. I don't have a trip planned. Maybe in the fall I can get over to Europe, but I will definitely let you guys know. And are you all throughout Italy, or which cities are you in?
We're in me, Paolo, and Davide are just 100 kilometers below Turin in Cuneo.
Okay.
And Francesco is in Milan, so we're on the
North
northern
Italy.
part, mountains all around.
Yeah, of course.
And good wine.
Yes, the best.
That's
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time and your questions.
Thank you.
And I'm happy that I could meet you. And David, thank you so much for making this happen, and persistent with my agents and making it. Just we finally got the date and we made it happen. So please let me know if you want me to talk again, and I'm happy to do it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you.